Good morning, everybody. Today is Saturday, March the 26th, 2022. I recently had a request for a Redline Nova update, and since I've learned to do something working on this car that I thought everybody else out there may be interested in learning how to do it, I recently located my wiper motor behind the firewall, and I learned a lot about doing this, frankly, by doing everything the wrong way. The reason I wanted to locate my wiper motor behind the firewall is because I built myself a flat firewall, with the exception of maybe the seam that runs along you can see right there. I've built a custom firewall for the car. The stock firewall had the wiper motor protruding through the firewall. It's a very, very ugly firewall, and so I wanted something that was a lot cleaner and prettier and more custom. So I decided to locate my wiper motor behind the firewall. There's a couple of things that I learned the hard way here, and the very first of which is when I disassembled the entire wiper assembly off of this car a couple of years ago, I didn't pay attention to how anything went together in terms of its orientation, and it quickly became obvious that that was a problem. You have got to pay close attention to the orientation of the linkage, and I don't just mean these up here. You know, the wiper arms are set on there to where they're threaded or, you know, splined, and you can set them in whatever orientation you like. But what you do not have that ability is with the linkage that you see right up under here. See, that linkage can sit there and turn, and it can rotate, you know, in a number of different directions. And what I found is you have got to know what the factory home position to that linkage is, because if you don't pay attention to that, you don't get it back into the factory home position, you'll run off and you'll mount your wiper motor, and as that arm, that pitman arm, goes through its oscillation, it will either try and over or under extend that linkage by pushing it too far in that direction or pulling it too much in this direction, and bad things starts happening. So once I realized that that was step number one to this process, was finding the home position, I visited my buddy Scott's house, and I took this photo here as well as this photo here that allowed me to see exactly how it was supposed to go on an original 1967 Nova. So thanks to my buddy Scott for letting me get up in his dash and take a photo. And at that point, I knew that I had to come back here and clock the linkage right here on the car in the factory position. That was step number one. Step number two was locating the wiper motor assembly in the proper location. This is where things started to get tricky. I decided that I would use the frame of my Selecta-Speed Selecta wiper motor, and I'll put a link down below in the description where you'll find this unit. The reason I decided to go with the Selecta-Speed unit is because I wanted intermittent wipers. You know, back in the old days in the 60s, you had on, a little on, and super on, and that was all you had. There was no intermittent wipers, so I decided to install one of their units. And the first thing that I did was basically just took the frame and put a tack weld on it right up in here, right around the backside. You can't really see it right there, but I'm saying right up in there. I put a tack weld on it to kind of just hold it in place in 3D space. And from there, I would just put a couple of brackets in that would, you know, just tack it here. And as I hooked up my linkage and I started to connect my wiper motor to my factory linkage up in here, what I came to find is that it is terribly important that the rotating axis of the linkage on your wiper motor be located in line in the same plane as the linkage on the car. If you have one piece that's rotating right here, and then you have another piece that's way off here rotating like this, they don't really jive together, and all of a sudden you'll start to see that wiper motor just sit there and just go literally moving all over the place, because nothing is really, you know, operating the way that it was designed to do. So this was the hard part really here. I had to very, very carefully mount my wiper motor to be sure, let me see if you can get a little bit better shot there, to be sure that you understood that where this thing right here rotates was in the same plane as my linkage that you see up in here. That was the second big thing that I learned I had to do. The third big hurdle in mounting this thing was you've got to understand that if you're using the factory linkage to connect this up to that, then all of a sudden the distance from the rotating axis of your motor up to the rotating axis of your linkage up in here is terribly important. It has got to be absolutely accurate. And in my case, it quickly became obvious that since I had this this massive doghouse in the car because I've moved my motor so far backwards. You can see I've got this great big inset into the Firewall. It became obvious I wasn't necessarily going to have any luck connecting the motor to the car with factory linkage. And so I got pretty clever at this point. If you'll have a look here, I actually just cut the linkage, the factory linkage right here. I welded a coupling nut onto it here, and I did the same thing over on this end. I welded a coupling nut. I then connected them in the middle with 3/8 inch threaded rod, and that, at the end of the day, allowed me to adjust the length of my linkage so that, you know, I could really get it tailored to the car to whatever it needed to be. So if anybody out there is going to do this, I highly recommend chopping your linkage in the middle and making it adjustable in length. My final hurdle came in my air conditioning ducts right here. If you have a look at the manual from Detroit Speed, they actually tell you that your air conditioning ducts from a vintage air unit are going to be so close to your wiper linkage right here that you're going to be blocking off those two ducts on the top. And I didn't really want to do that. Sure, I understood that that meant extra flow would come out of my bottom ducts right here, but I didn't want to do that if I didn't have to. So if you have a look at this shot right here, you'll notice that I started off with straight wiper linkage in the car and that it was rubbing against the air conditioning duct. I didn't want to do that, so at that point I decided I would try and do a curved piece of linkage. You can see right there, I basically just put some bends into it. I ended up adjusting the length of things, you know, re-welding it here as well as back up here. But at the end of the day, I was able to accomplish a set of linkage right here that created extra space right here for my air conditioning ducts. You can see in this shot right here how that linkage then goes around my ducts so that I'll be able to use all 4 of my ducts. So that was a big win. Another of my big recent wins on this car came in mounting the AC unit, the Vintage Air AC unit, under the dash. I'll put a link down below to where I got this unit from Vintage Air. I'll also put a link down below to my new CNC Crossfire 4-foot by 3-foot CNC Plasma table. I used that thing to make the brackets that I mounted the AC unit in the car. That thing has really changed the game for me, and let me show you exactly what I mean by that. If you'll have a look here, you'll notice that I've built a bracket system in the car with elongated holes to where I can shift my AC unit left or right. I've got 4 different sets of elongated holes where I can raise it up and down, and then you can't really necessarily see it quite as well, but you also have elongated holes over here on the sides here and here. So at the end of the day, I can shift my AC unit left, right, up, down, forward, backward, whatever is necessary to create a little bit of clearance where I need it at the end of the day. I'm not 100% sure, you know, where all the hoses and ducts and everything are going to go, so I wanted to do something that would give me the ability to move that unit back and forth a little bit, you know, as needed. Speaking of the CNC Plasma Cutter, I'm using this thing to create all sorts of really cool stuff for this car that is changing the game for me. For instance here, you'll notice that I've got unibody brackets mounted to the front of the car to be able to mount my rotisserie to it. I was able to CNC cut out that plate right there on the back of the car. I did something relatively similar since I don't, you know, have leaf springs in the car and I don't have, you know, the stock frame where I can attach any kind of valence brackets or anything. I welded some threaded bungs that I got on eBay into the frame rail of the car, and then I used my CNC cutter and made brackets that basically just weld to here, and so I can take this entire assembly on and off anytime very, very quickly as I want to. And so I've got my rotisserie brackets done for the car. I'll be able to put the car on and off of the rotisserie very, very easily thanks to those brackets that I made. So that's coming along really, really well as well. One of the other things that I recently did for the car that I was really happy about was I used my CNC Plasma Cutter to create seat mount brackets for the car that, frankly, are just so professional. They're way better than anything I would have ever been able to do, you know, using stock tools, you know? I mean, you can see what I mean. I'm creating elongated holes, and everything is just way, way better than what I could do with my plasma cutter and a cutoff wheel. So I'm really glad that I got that thing. I should have bought that cutter on day 1 of this build, but I didn't do it. So you can't really tell it, but I've got nearly all of the sheet metal work for the entire car done. If you have a look across the back of the car, I've done the most of the package tray, the wheel wells, all of the floorboards and everything. There's actually my transmission tunnel sitting in the car right there. I've got you know, the toe boards for the car done, which are these right here, the firewall, the whole 9 yards. You can't necessarily tell that it's all done, but take my word for it. I'll show you guys in an upcoming video how far along I've gotten there. So car is coming along really, really good. My next step, I'm going to get it outside and sandblast the tops of the frame rails, prime those so that I can then weld in my floor pans in the car. And once that's done, it's pretty much time to get it on a rotisserie and start having a look at, you know, actually bodying the car. So pretty exciting stuff. Hope you guys are enjoying my videos and learned something about how to locate a wiper motor behind a firewall. I sure as hell did. Appreciate you guys watching. Click the subscribe, the thumbs up, notification, all that crap if you want to. Follow along. I always appreciate new followers. You guys have a great one. Take care.